Good afternoon. My name is Bill Sullivan. I'm a director of Eutex International, which is the parent company of ATEC Certification and Training. And on behalf of the Eutex and the ATEC team, I want to take this opportunity to welcome you today and thank you for investing some of your time in being with us this afternoon. If you haven't done so already, would you please silence your cell phones or any other noisemakers that you've got at this time. It's a privilege for me to introduce our speaker today, Commander Jim Rocco of the United States Coast Guard. Commander Jim is currently Chief Offshore National Center of Expertise and a 22-year veteran of the United States Coast Guard. In July 2012, Commander Jim transitioned into his current assignment as Supervisor of the Coast Guard's Offshore National Center of Expertise in Homer, Louisiana, after completing a 2-year assignment as the Coast Guard's liaison to vessel and offshore classification societies. In his 22 years with the Coast Guard, Jim has served in field assignments as a commercial vessel inspector and port operations officer working in the ports of Seattle, Morgan City, Louisiana, and Chicago. Past field experiences have included oversight of multiple new vessel and facility construction projects and foreign flagged vessel examination initiatives to managing coastal and offshore spill response capabilities. Additional Washington, D.C. headquarters assignments include policy and procurement positions in the Offices of Navigation, Port and Facility Activities, the National Maritime Center, and the Coast Guard's Office of Acquisitions. Jim earned his undergraduate degree from Central Michigan University. He earned his MBA with a focus in finance from Northern Illinois University and a Master's of International Public Policy with a focus in energy resources from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Would you please join me and welcome Commander Rocco.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Eutex for allowing the Coast Guard to come and have this opportunity to address you all this afternoon. I guess just a little bit before we get started on exactly what the Offshore National Center of Expertise does, and kind of let you know and about how we are the point of first contact with the Coast Guard for anything offshore where you might not know otherwise who to call in the Coast Guard should you have an issue or a concern. So basically, we are an office that's located in Homer, Louisiana, and the way we are organizationally positioned is we're kind of in the middle of what goes on with our offshore inspectors, such as Tony here in the audience, and corresponding with our offshore inspectors on a daily, weekly kind of basis, being down here physically or geographically located in the Gulf of Mexico. However, my boss is up in Washington, D.C. So when we have our conversations, compare notes, as we go week to week, month to month, with all the activity that goes on down here, I kind of funnel all that, and then I can channel that up to Washington to truly give them a realistic perspective on what's actually happening here in the Gulf of Mexico. And then also, conversely, when Washington's talking about offshore regulations and thinking about, in their infinite wisdom, something that would be really good for you all, they may call me up and say, "Hey Jim, what do you think? Is this going to fly?" And I can say, "Well, yeah, that's a good idea, or maybe not that one," and we can kind of talk about that. So we're kind of in the middle, Coast Guard internal of the Coast Guard organization. In addition to that, our office works quite a bit with industry. Any issues or concerns that industry might encounter in the offshore that involve the Coast Guard, we try to get in the middle of that and then be able to mediate or otherwise provide suggestions on how we might resolve some of the issues that a company may have in more of an informal way, and also try to be more efficient in trying to make those resolutions happen. Being the previous class society liaison for the Coast Guard, the vessel or the classification society liaison, I work a lot with ABS and DNV or DNVGL and Lloyd's and others as an intermediary still for the issues pertaining to offshore. So I'm routinely in correspondence with those guys, Mike and others, to facilitate. Basically, we are a facilitator. We are a clearinghouse. As I said, if you don't know who to call for a particular issue that you've already been discussing with the Coast Guard, call us first. We'll answer the question. If we can't answer the question, we'll certainly direct you to the individual that can field that specific question that you might have. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure, well, first of all, I'll back up and say I am not an electrical engineer, nor would I ever profess to be one. And you all in the audience probably have a lot deeper level of detail than do I. At the NCOE, I have a very broad scope. I am a jack of many things and probably a master of very little. So if I tend to stray or maybe have a misunderstanding of something that I might even be talking about that I think I have an understanding, don't hesitate to correct me on that. I want to make sure you guys in the end get the accurate information that you need. So with that, I will start here. These slides, just kind of a memory jogger, general information for you to know. And as we go along, memory jogger for me to kind of, as talking points to kind of to be able to address. And then what I'd like to do is, when I get done with this general overview, is I'd really encourage you to take advantage of the Q&A session, to be able to have any questions that you have answered. In addition, I'd like to field some questions or hear some questions that can better direct me what I might send back up to Washington as it pertains to this hazardous location regulation, okay? So I really want it to be a two-way dialogue. I've got a thick skin. I take nothing personal. You know, don't hesitate to fire away on anything that you need clarification on. Just those 5 points. Why are we doing it? There's obvious reasons for that. Hazardous locations, just general background information, current regulations for electrical equipment that we have now, the notice of policy, the voluntary compliance that we put forth in 2012, and then the 2013 proposed rules for hazardous locations. So essentially, you know, what are we doing here? And I think it's quite obvious. We're trying to make sure that the integrity of what's necessary to ensure the equipment in hazardous locations is upheld. Going back to, I guess, on the Coast Guard side, and where the Coast Guard regulations for hazardous locations started way back when, however far back that was, is they very much had a domestic focus. The thinking was, well, we need to make sure that vessels that are built and operated in the U.S. Have a certain level of integrity when it comes to hazardous locations. And in the context of the time that those regulations were written, there probably wasn't a whole lot of thought given to vessels, international vessels, coming in or working in U.S. waters, not nearly like we have today. So that's kind of from where we started to where we are now, and how is it that we bridge that regulatory gap as on paper it's seen, and I don't know, maybe you all can tell the Coast Guard how much of a gap that really is, or maybe isn't, and that's what that dialogue process between in the NPRM or in the regulatory effort, the notice of proposed rulemaking, the comment period, and the dialogue that can happen back and forth will help us to make sure that we hit the mark when we move forward on that regulatory effort. So 505, 501 covers the requirement to Class 1, Division 1, and 2 locations, obviously, and then 505 is oriented towards that zone, the zone definitions. Some of this may be review for some of you maybe not, but I'll go through that nonetheless. The current regulations identify basically those 3 sources of standard, which we then incorporate by reference. And for those of you who don't know, if you look in the Coast Guard regulations, generally at the beginning of each subchapter, you'll see a paragraph that talks about incorporation by reference. And what that means is that the Coast Guard has, in the course of developing regulations, you know, however far back it was, 5 years, 10 years ago or more, or today for that matter, the Coast Guard would look out in industry to see what standards exist, you know, whether they be electrical standards, whether they be drilling standards, you know, whatever they might be. And so in that incorporation by reference paragraph in the regulations, you'll see a list of various standards. And so if the standard is listed in the regulation, it in effect becomes a regulation. And all we do is have to list the standard. So anytime I say incorporation by reference, it means that it was an industry standard that became a regulation just by virtue of us making that reference in the regulations. Of course, Class 1 hazardous locations would normally, you would normally expect to have quantities that would be considered an issue if you didn't have the proper equipment otherwise. And again, review for some. Obviously, there's not the differences between 500 and 505. They don't mesh up directly. And I know that there are some details as to how is it that equipment is tested, say, for example, to Division 2 by 500 or Zone 2 by 505. And it is, I guess, some of those details that, that come into play when you start talking about NEC and IEC. And a lot of those details are probably beyond what I would discuss or even try to discuss with you here today. I want to try to stay higher level and go more into the implications of the Coast Guard's rulemaking, this rulemaking, as we move forward in time and understanding what some of the stakeholder concerns are. Although the comment period having already ended, we have certainly got an earful of what some of those concerns are, namely if operator A or contractor A currently has a drilling unit in the Gulf of Mexico working, and say this regulation was to come into force tomorrow, and operator B hasn't yet had their drilling unit come because they're not on contract until 3 months from now, if that requirement came into force tomorrow, does that mean that operator A has an advantage because they were already here in the Gulf of Mexico over operator B because they weren't? Now, when you read the NPRM, that's kind of this picture that you get in your mind of a difference, and I completely understand how that could be possible. However, I can tell you, having talked to the folks that are actually working on this regulation up in Washington, I talked to them this morning, and I said, man, what am I going to tell these guys when they ask that question? You know, I mean, you guys got to give me something. So essentially, what they told me was, boy, we got an earful on that one, and we are certainly taking that into consideration when anything else is forthcoming, whether that be an interim final rule, which gives you one more bite at the apple, or even a final rule for that matter. So I couldn't tell you if there's going to be an interim final rule, which basically means Coast Guard responds to the initial comments. They publish in the Federal Register the results of those comments, and then maybe refines what was stated in as an intended regulation in the original NPRM, and then gives industry the chance to comment again, or if it's a case where, well, we think we got it pretty well covered, we're going to issue the final rule on this. The other big question that they got was, well, gosh, you know, today I'm operating no problem. I have a fleet of foreign drilling units in the Gulf of Mexico. If that regulation were to come into effect tomorrow, do I got to rip off all this equipment and put on, you know, the IEC or Coast Guard approved equipment actually, and do that, you know, just like that on a dime? And the answer to that, well, I can't give you the definitive answer, but if I'm a betting man, I would say no, that's not what the Coast Guard is going to do. And what you can do is you can look at the history of rulemaking, whether it be the Coast Guard or anywhere else, and anytime there's something significant that is looked at as coming into being and affecting a lot of stakeholders, and significantly affecting a lot of stakeholders, is that you're probably going to see some kind of a grandfather provision. What would that be? I couldn't tell you right now, and I know that the NPRM didn't really discuss that the first time around, but I can tell you that the folks who are writing the regulations are considering that issue very, very much. So I guess what I want to try and do is attempt to manage the anxiety level that there might be around this rulemaking, and to allow people to understand that this is something that is in process. And actually, the rulemaking process, the way that it's set up, it's intended to be set up that way very deliberatively, so that the stakeholders have a chance to take pot shots at it. You know, oh my gosh, what were these people thinking? Were they on drugs? I got to comment on this, and you know, and tell them how that might affect your world of work. And by law, by the Administrative Procedures Act, every single comment, if it's 500 comments that we get or more on this rulemaking, we actually have to provide an answer to each and every comment in the Federal Register whenever we publish either that interim final rule or the final rule. So it's not as if the Coast Guard reads your comments and says, this guy's out to lunch, and throws it away. We actually have to respond to those comments. So it keeps us honest and allows you to make sure that you know your comment's going to be addressed. Maybe not in the way that you would hope, but at least there will be an explanation so you can close that loop. So, but I know, knowing the people up at headquarters that are working on this issue, they're all well-intentioned individuals, very rational, very logical people, and have taken to heart the comments that they've reviewed so far. And just in the conversations I've had with them, they understand the issues moving forward and are working on making sure that that there is a reasonable approach to developing that final rule so that comes to pass to do what is to do in the end what the Coast Guard is intending to do, which is to sustain the integrity of that third-party arrangement, the third-party verification or certification arrangement, but doing that in a way that makes sense and isn't overly onerous to where the costs supersede the benefit. So. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what this slide illustrates, but you put all the equipment together to make sure that the integrity of that system, that collection of components that comprise that system, are there, and can reflect what is it that is identified as those bubbles on the general arrangement for where those hazardous zones are, and to ensure that the components all comply with whether it's Class 1, Div 1, Zone 0, what have you. So. Okay, so basically what we have here is 46 Code of Federal Regulations, right? The specific site there, 111, 105, but more generally is subchapter J, as we know it, and that really is the Bible for the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard inspectors when they go out and they do their inspections. When they do an inspection on a U.S. Unit, that's what they're looking at. Now, when we do inspections on foreign units, we're looking at the MODU code. And so when we compare this to what the MODU code says, it's interesting because I think it's the 2009, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2009 MODU code is the one in Chapter 6, I think it is, that lists all the IEC references. Is it Chapter 6? I think it is. And prior to this 2009 MODU code, I think 89 doesn't make nearly the thorough reference to the list of incorporation by reference with the IEC as does the 2009 MODU code. So not only is this issue, has this issue kind of raised in awareness and concern with the U.S., but also internationally, we want to make sure that the consistency is there. So, and then as far as how deep the Coast Guard may go in the detail for verifying on a foreign unit, how is it that IEC is being complied with? That's usually on a case-by-case. The way that the system on the Marine side is set up is that the expectation is that any foreign unit that comes into the Gulf of Mexico has undergone already a thorough examination, not only for verification of design and equipment, but for operation, done by what's known as the flag state. So, and this comes all under the International Maritime Organization and all this kind of stuff. So we, as the receiving country of a unit flagged at another country, we are under IMO obligated to do an examination of that unit when it comes to the U.S. However, routinely, the level of detail by which that's done isn't such that it's the same as what we would do on a U.S. flag unit, because the flag state, the unit from, or the country from where the unit comes from, first gets it done there. And to flip that around, if for some reason we had a floating U.S. flag unit, where we don't, but if we did, we would get more into the details there, and then it would go anywhere in the world, and then it would receive the same treatment somewhere else. So it's kind of this reciprocity that, that countries have who are all party to the International Maritime Organization. So at any rate, and I don't want to get too far into that, but so there's a series of checks and balances. We have a certain level of detail to which we go, and then in the course of routine examinations on that unit, should we have any questions on any particular piece of equipment, whether it's life-saving or stability or ballast control, whatever, in this case electrical components, then we would just start asking questions. Hey, you know, is this has this been installed properly? Before you installed it, you know, did it comply with the manufacturing requirements as per IEC, and those kinds of things. So so we're not trying to needlessly do more than is necessary to maintain the integrity of that system, and not only on the actual inspection side or examination side are we trying to do that in the most rational way possible, but also with this regulatory effort, are we trying to make sure that as we move forward, it makes sense? That's the bottom line. So, okay, so so what is it the Coast Guard is really trying to do here? And maybe I should back up and talk about the Coast Guard regulations as it relates to certified equipment and how it started out several years ago. Okay, so I don't know how many years ago it was. Tony, you may know. I don't know. But when it happened, there was very much a domestic focus in creating those. You know, as I said earlier, the thought to trying to make applicability to foreign offshore units coming to the OCS to work, it didn't enter anybody's mind. And so arguably, I would argue that we need to update that approach. And so, but the approach has not yet been updated, and it is very much, it very much still is of the expectation that when coming to the U.S., if a unit comes in and has equipment on board and has hazardous locations, that it will comply with some form of third-party verification. And I guess it was it was a few years ago now, 2010, something like that, where the Coast Guard stumbled on these barges up in the Northwest that came into port, tank barges, and they had deck sensors and equipment on board that were ATEX, A-T-E-X. And for those of you who are familiar with that scheme, it allows for self-certification. It allows for the manufacturer to say, yes, this meets Zone 0, or this meets, you know, Class 1 Div 1, whichever wherever they're marketing. However, it doesn't preclude third-party verification under ATEX. Well, the way that the Coast Guard looked at that was, if you're ATEX certified, or that there's an ATEX certified piece of equipment that we come across on a unit that's in the OCS in the Gulf of Mexico, how do we know if it was, you know, third party or not? And so there was a question of integrity in what originally was in the Coast Guard regulations, which was third party. Okay, so now we're scratching our heads saying, okay, now we found this issue. We've got these foreign vessels and units coming into the U.S., working in the U.S. However, they don't meet what U.S. flag vessels and units comply with. And not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. Of course, you know, you could argue there's a competitive advantage and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line is, you know, if you have a barge, or say just a conventional ship, tank ship or tank barge, sitting at the dock, and it's foreign, and we don't know what kind of equipment's on there, and there's a U.S. ship or barge sitting right next door, we do know the integrity of that equipment, then common sense tells you, gosh, it should be one way or the other. Either you don't care, or you're going to enforce uniformly and maintain the integrity uniformly of what you think you need to do. So that's kind of the Coast Guard's approach right now. The result of which was that NPRM. So now you have the NPRM, which the intent is to make things consistent, and of course there's a lot open the way it's currently written to how is it that, you know, well, what are we going to finally end up with, and man, how is it going to impact me? So that's where we're at right now. And so, you know, me being here today, I'm trying to I guess, provide some background information and to let everybody know that this didn't just fall out of the sky. It wasn't somebody just sitting around twiddling their thumbs thinking, gosh, what new regulation can I come up with that I think is a good idea? This actually, in part, came also out of the after action report for the Deepwater Horizon as an issue to address. And so, of course, when anything mentioned with Deepwater Horizon after action investigation, anything gets mentioned in there, well, the Coast Guard's obligated to address that. So one of the ways that we're addressing that issue is through this NPRM. And so whenever we do this, I try to understand the other side of the issue. If I put myself in industry shoes, what questions might I ask the Coast Guard to know that the Coast Guard is doing its due diligence in pursuing this effort? Okay, such as, well, gosh, has there been anything else since 2010 that, whether inside the Coast Guard or outside the Coast Guard, i.e. Bessie, that is currently being done that might help mitigate this concern? Standing up here right now, what I do know is I don't think there is, but I'm not going to declaratively say there isn't. I don't think there is. Is there anything, if I'm on the industry side, is there anything in my SIMS plan that I can refer to that specifically addresses this issue? And I'm already doing it, And if you're already doing it, then either you don't care because you're already there, if the regulation's enacted or not, or you actually respond to the rulemaking and you say, hey, we're already doing this. On page 75 of our SIMS plan, it talks all about how we maintain and how we sustain the reliability and the integrity of equipment and installations in hazardous zones. So it's almost like as you see these things, there are all these different pieces that are maybe seen as being separate initially, but they actually have some interplay, and you can actually probably use that interplay to your advantage in being able to articulate to the Coast Guard, in this case, whether or not the rulemaking is a good one. So, okay, so that's just that happens to be just a smattering of Coast Guard certified third-party testing labs. And so I guess what I would say is at this point, or I'd talk about is the differences between what is considered Coast Guard third-party certified and IEC EX third-party certified. Okay, as you may or may not know, the Coast Guard is certainly interested in seeing the IEC EX third-party certified labs become Coast Guard certified. And the Coast Guard, in deliberating over this issue, if ATEX is not good, ATEX as the Coast Guard sees it, and I'm not saying it's not good, I'm just saying not good from a regulatory perspective, what is it that we can look at as a model that might already be out there that is generally accepted, and we can kind of jump on to that bandwagon and make things more consistent. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we want the drilling units to be able to operate wherever they need to operate, and we don't want to hamper that. But we want them to be safe. So when you look at the strategy that the IEC EX uses, I mean, that's very, very closely aligned with what the Coast Guard certification process would look to see. And in fact, so much so that the Coast Guard has invited any IEC certified third-party lab to submit for Coast Guard certification. And so, as was explained to me by the subject matter experts up in Washington, it's really not a heavy lift. In fact, I talked to somebody earlier today who said, hey, we happen to be one of those, actually he's one of the guys, one of the companies here on the slide, and he said, yeah, we're IEC certified, and we submitted for Coast Guard certification, and we had it in 60 days. And well, what did you have to submit? Well, it was kind of a paperwork drill. They wanted to know a little bit more about our facilities. They wanted to know about who was it that was doing the testing. And they wanted to know the locations of where certain testing on certain components could be done. Is that all? Well, yeah, it's all we really had to submit. And lo and behold, they got their Coast Guard approval. and their Coast Guard certification, and they're off and running. So I think, and being at OTC the last couple of days and having some side conversations, there seemed to be, at least with some, a concern that it's almost like you might have to reinvent the wheel to go from IEC to Coast Guard, and you don't. I mean, they're very closely aligned, and the analogy I would use is you're circling third base and you're running a home plate, having IEC EX certification, you know, and the home plate being the Coast Guard certification. So they're not that far off, and the lift there is not that significant. And then you might ask the question, well, geez, well, why do we got to do that anyway? Well, I mean, I guess the current answer I might give you is this process that we're looking at, getting IEC to get Coast Guard certified, is maintaining the integrity of the way that the Coast Guard regulations are currently set up. Is that right or wrong? Could the Coast Guard just take IEC completely and have them be one and the same? Maybe, I don't know. But that's for the techno guys and gals up at Washington to decide. But at this point, this is kind of the shortest point to the resolution of addressing these differences. So in December 2012, the Coast Guard published a what we call our notice of policy, which was a voluntary compliance measure for how we could move forward with contractors meeting what we would see the need to maintaining the integrity for those hazardous locations. And if you go and you look, and I don't know how many of you actually looked at this. In fact, if you were to Google Coast Guard voluntary compliance hazardous locations, there's a website that would pop up, and you can just click on that and see that voluntary compliance. But again, if I were a betting man, what you're going to see in a final rule is something along the lines, probably, of what that voluntary compliance is currently. So I would very much encourage you to take a look at that. So then in June 2013, that Federal Register notice that everybody loves so much came out, and then what was interesting about this is I think the comment period, if I remember, was originally October, and then it got extended out 30 or 60 days. And anytime you see a comment period get extended on any regulatory effort or issue, you can kind of sit back and say, there must be some additional interest above and beyond what we might normally see from any other regulatory project. So basically what happened was the Coast Guard had a request to extend that so that they could get better, more robust comments on this issue, and the Coast Guard was happy to do that. So you can kind of look at some of the things that kind of play out along the way in the whole regulatory process, and kind of take tidbits of information about how well maybe the Coast Guard is understanding of the details exactly of how this should proceed, or maybe not, and which is okay. I mean, if the Coast Guard decided, because they want to maintain third-party integrity, and oh, by the way, the Deepwater Horizon report said we got to do this. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do this. Let's throw that out there. But of course, when you put out an NPRM, there's nothing that says in writing or anywhere else that final rule will be anything close to what that NPRM says. So again, I try to throw myself on the industry side. If I read an NPRM and I don't like it, then they're going to hear from me. I'm gonna generate a comment and make sure that I get that submitted, so that they know what I think. And the guys and girls up at Coast Guard headquarters, they're not stupid. They understand that the comments that they receive from those folks who wrote them, or actually in groups that wrote them, are probably much more knowledgeable about the job that they do than is Coast Guard people. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to remember, we're regulators, and while we can do that, sometimes we're really good at it, sometimes maybe not so much. The folks out in the industry are the ones doing the job every day, and they know that job better than we do, hands down. We may luck out and have somebody come to work at the Coast Guard that had previously done something like that, but by and large, the industry is much more knowledgeable on the nuances of the details of this or anything else. So I definitely take that to heart. Okay. So basically, proposed NPRM, I think, laid out those three options there that you see. And again, as far as whether these end up in the final rule will really depend on that dialogue, the receipt of those comments, and the concerns or lack thereof that anybody might have for what's been proposed. So. So as I understand it, and you, some of you in the audience could probably give me a couple-hour dissertation. There are nuances and details to trying to map over Class 1, Division 1, and 2 to the zone scheme, and how it is each are determined, the criteria by which they're determined, in order to come up with, at the end of that test, well, this is Zone 1 and this is Class 1, and how do they fit together? Well, as I understand it, they don't neatly fit together. However, I think the important thing to realize is that, looking at it from very high level myself, I recognize, hey, Zone 0 is the best piece of equipment to have. Class 1 Div 1 is the best piece of equipment to have. Where do I need it? Do I need it? And of course, you got to make the economic considerations for where we're going to use that, but I think what happens is when you have an IEC certified third party that then gets the Coast Guard certified third party or certification, then this concern, the differences of some of these details become less, because either one you use, depending on the application, you're covered. So I think that's an important point to note. Okay, so as I said, this was one of this issue was one that was received by more than one comment so far, and again, if I were on the other side, I wouldn't be overly concerned necessarily for the implementation, because the Coast Guard, and what that implementation might be, because the Coast Guard is, is cognizant of the fact that, to try and expect, that equipment would be replaced, installations would be replaced. I mean, again, you have to do, by law in the regulatory process, along with the dialogue we have to have with industry, with the public, there has to be a cost-benefit analysis conducted, and we have economists on staff that do all that. So you got to be able to run the numbers and show that the expense, if you're going to move forward with something, that the expense of moving forward with something is not so much so that it overweights against the benefits to be achieved and the risk to be mitigated. So we actually have to run that exercise to be able to do that, and it gets quite detailed. And I don't know enough in the regulatory process to go into those details, but suffice it to say that those considerations have to be made before anything would go into effect. Okay, so as far as this slide's concerned, this is just an example of the series on the IECEX pieces of equipment and those approvals necessary. And if you go and you look at the 2009 MODU code, I mean, you'll roughly see something similar to this. And I think what's important here to note is that going forward, globally, to be able to take your unit anywhere and do work, you're looking at the IEC. I mean, you're looking at the IEC, and to come into the Gulf of Mexico, the Coast Guard's looking at this also, and wanting to make as transparently as we possibly can the ability to come to the Gulf of Mexico, be able to work in the Gulf of Mexico, understanding that there's work being done elsewhere. So, okay, so that was my high-level introduction, or if you want to call it that, for kind of where we're at right now. And again, the more questions I get right now in the next 10, 15 minutes or so, the more takeaway you'll have for what you need. So feel free to fire away anything you have.